Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Becca Denley, and I will be your presenter today. And today we're going to talk about detoxing our household products, right? So there's so many chemicals and toxins in our household products. And if you're like me, sometimes you think, well, everything has so many chemicals in it nowadays. There's just no point in trying to avoid them because they're everywhere. And then, you're like me. I sometimes think that. But if we can be educated on what all of these chemicals and toxins are, where they're found, what they could affect in our health, we can limit our exposure to them. And, even if we're limiting our exposure to chemicals by 5, 10, 20, 30%, it can be really beneficial to our health and our well being. So let's dive in here. There are a surprising number of toxins used daily in our homes. So, homes and home furnishings in North America today are built of materials sourced from worldwide. Material standards are not adequately harmonized between nations, and commercial interests often override the health concerns associated with many products. So, since we're getting a lot of our products worldwide, it is hard to have a rule over all of the different chemicals because we can't control, what other countries are doing with the chemicals that are in each of their things. And so oftentimes we're not necessarily focused on the health concerns associated because it's, manufacturing and a lot of times if we're looking at manufacturing, we're just looking at money being made, right? So, the nationwide increase in immune system disorders, neurological problems, chronic fatigue syndrome, multiple chemical sensitivities, allergies, and hormonal disturbances point to environmental factors. So, over time, all of these disorders and problems and health concerns continue to add up. And so, we are definitely looking at environmental factors being a part of that and the chemicals that are in everything that surround us in our everyday life. So in this session, we will discuss some of the most common toxins used in household products, and we're going to help you learn how you can reduce your exposure to them, just being more aware. So, did you know there are over 12,000 chemicals used in typical household products? Kind of crazy. Thinking of everything that we use, dish cleaner, multi purpose cleaner, anything with a fragrance in it, or an air conditioner scent flavor, all these different these things that we're using on a normal day basis all have some sort of chemicals and toxins in them. So, there are some possible impacts of these common toxins. We can look at neurological problems. So, research has shown that some products contain chemicals that it can impact diagnosis of several neurological problems, ranging from MS and Parkinson's to ADHD, ASD, and other neurobehavioral issues. We can also see endocrine disruption. So, looking at hormonal issues in the body, and our endocrine system is what's running our metabolism and really just telling our body how to function all day long. So, these chemicals are linked with developmental, reproductive, brain, immune, and other problems. Additionally, they are slow to break down, which means they stay in our environment for long periods of time. So a chemical that you maybe felt, the smell of yesterday, those chemicals can stay within your house or in your body for an elongated amount of time. Then we also have immune system disorders. So many chemicals have been found to cause increased risks of allergies, both food and seasonal allergies, asthma, and autoimmune disorders, as well as suppressed immune systems. Now, our immune system has a reaction to anything it thinks is an invader, right? And so sometimes these toxins can feel like an invader, and the immune system can have a high alert as a response to that, which can cause our immune system's response to kind of get out of balance and not necessarily respond to the things that it's supposed to be responding to because it's constantly on guard from all of the toxins that we are taking in. So today we're going to talk about the most common toxins in household products. We have our VOCs, phthalates, pesticides, mold and fungi, fertilizers, heavy metals, bug spray, and PBDEs. So let's talk about each of these. First, we'll talk about VOCs. So according to the EPA, Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, are emitted as gases from certain solids or liquids. So, VOCs include a variety of chemicals, some of which may be short and long term adverse health effects. Concentrations of many VOCs are consistently higher indoors, up to 10 times higher than outdoors. Obviously, we're in a more enclosed space. And so, if these are being emitted through gases, we're going to have a higher effect if we're indoors smelling in all of these different toxins. So we've got paints, varnishes, and wax all contain organic solvents, as do many cleaning, disinfecting, cosmetic, degreasing, and hobby products. So these can have an effect on many different health concerns. So we can have an effect on our eye, nose, and throat irritation, headaches, loss of coordination, and nausea, damage to our liver, kidney, and central nervous systems. Some organics can cause cancer in animals. Some are suspected or known to cause cancer in humans. So, really looking at the liver, sometimes, so if you know the liver, it is the filter of everything that we put into our body. So, we think about everything we drink and eat, our liver is having to filter that out, but also the things that we're breathing in or absorbing, right? Our liver is working through anything that is getting into our body from any way, right? So anything, even if it's just a gas that we're smelling or inhaling, we definitely can see all of these different types of health concerns or parts of our body being damaged in the response to having to filter out all of these chemicals. So when you're using these products, anything like paint, varnish, wax, anything, around the house that has these high level of smells. When using these products, be sure to use them in well ventilated areas with a mask and skin protection. So really wearing gloves when you're using, these high chemical based things, wearing gloves, wearing a mask, keeping the doors and windows open, when you're working on any of these things, just to keep more airflow, using a fan while you're using these as well, trying to get the air to flow out. And any way that you can cover, your skin or your mouth and nose from inhaling and taking in, right? So oftentimes we have to use a lot of these things in our homes, and so just making sure that we're being smart about the way that we are utilizing them so that we can limit our exposure and absorption of all of these different chemicals. All right, then looking at phthalates, it is not 100% understood how these impact long term health. Probably haven't been around long enough or, a growing study just yet to know the long-term health effect, but we do know that most people get them from household items like vinyl flooring, personal care products like hair care, body wash, some cosmetics, fragrances, household cleaners, and some foods. So, according to JAMA and other research groups, phthalates have been linked to asthma, ADHD, breast cancer, obesity, type 2 diabetes, low IQ, neurodevelopmental issues, behavioral issues, autism spectrum disorders, and altered reproductive development and male fertility issues. So really linked to a lot of different, health concerns, right? And so again, we just want to limit how much we get exposure to these. Yeah, so I just have a comment here. I think it's worth noting that when advertising to use a mask, that the mask is appropriately, yes, rated absolutely for the task. An N95 will do nothing to protect against most vapors. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great point. Is really looking at making sure the mask is meant for painting, and you can go to the hardware store and look at masks that are made for, when you're doing a painting job, it's going to be a different like seal that is going to cover it for you. Yeah. So don't, don't go get the COVID masks, that that we all used for so many months. And making sure that you are looking at the hardware store for ones that are meant for, paint and varnishes and things of that nature. Thank you so much. I appreciate that comment. All right, next talking about pesticides. So, the industrialization of the agricultural sector has increased the chemical burden on natural ecosystems. So, pesticides can cause short term adverse health effects called acute effects, as well as chronic adverse effects that can occur months or years after exposure. So, examples of this would be acute health effects, including stinging eyes, rashes, blisters, blindness, nausea, dizziness, and diarrhea. Short term in that moment that you're really feeling the effects of it. And then examples of known chronic effects are we can see that maybe it's causing cancers, birth defects, reproductive harm, toxicity, neurological and developmental toxicity, and disruption of the endocrine system. So again, your endocrine system is what's telling your entire body how to function, right? I always call it this little game of telephone that everything in your system is telling each part of that system what to do. And so we want the endocrine system to be working really well. And so think about, things like hormones and, thyroid and things of that nature are when we're talking about endocrine problems, that's what we're talking about. Pesticides have been implicated in human studies of leukemia, lymphoma, and cancers of the brain and sex organs. So, lymphoma and anything to do with the lymphatic system, our lymphatic system works really hard to fight against invaders, right? And so our lymphatic system can get very bogged down and overactive again if we're trying to fight off invaders, and we can get a heavy amount of inflammation in the body, especially in the lymphatic system, when we have a lot of these outside toxins coming in. No, the International Agency for Research on Cancer categorizes glyphosate or a probable carcinogen for humans. So in 2020, the EPA released a statement saying it does not pose a risk to humans if used properly. So a pest in the pesticide family is glyphosate, and so they're categorizing this as a carcinogen. So carcinogens are cancer-causing toxins in a lot of the products that we use. And so the EPA released a statement saying it does not pose a risk to humans if used properly. So again, making sure that we see this guy has probably, I'm assuming, a pretty good mask on, right? And so making sure that if we are utilizing or around any pesticides, any sprays, we'll get to bug spray here in a minute, that we're again just utilizing it properly. And, looking at pesticides also when you're eating fruits and vegetables, making sure that you're cleaning your fruits and vegetables thoroughly, because obviously there's going to be pesticides utilized, to make sure that there's no bugs coming in when they're growing them. And so really making sure that you are thoroughly cleaning your fruits and vegetables to be sure that you're getting as much of any chemicals off of them. All right, talking about mold and fungus. So, molds can also cause asthma attacks in people with asthma who are allergic to mold. So, in addition, mold exposure can irritate the eyes, skin, nose, throat, and lungs. Inside your home, you can control mold growth by controlling humidity levels. So, if you got a lot of humidity going on, making sure that you're controlling those humidity levels, promptly fixing leaking roofs, windows, and pipes, thoroughly cleaning and drying after flooding, ventilating showers, laundry, and cooking areas. Now, mold and fungus you can go a while without really realizing that you have it in your home, right? So if you've ever had some sort of water damage or, a pipe that leaked, really making sure that you have, your handyman or somebody to check out all of the spaces, in the walls that could have gotten affected and gotten water, because that can definitely grow mold and fungus. And you could be breathing that in all day long inside your home and have no idea that, inside the walls is mold and fungus. So really making sure that anything to do with water or anything causing, a moisture in your home, making sure that there's no leftovers that would be getting moldy and producing fungus. So fungi cause over 1 million eye infections every year, many of which result in blindness. Most fungi are not serious pathogenic threats, but people with weakened immune systems remain susceptible, and the incidence of fungal disease has been increasing. Recent evidence, mostly from animal models, suggests that alterations in the fungal components of the gut can affect the severity of gastric ulcers, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, food allergies, and even alcoholic liver disease. So, really looking at if there's fungus in the air, our body again is going to worry and fight off fungal coming into the body, even if it's just through what you're breathing in or maybe even touching. And so it can cause issues more so in ulcerative colitis, anything where you have ulcers, if you're have Crohn's disease or food allergies, anything that is the gut is having to fight off any fungus or mold, then breathing it in is also going to make it even harder. These items do a good job at removal. So, looking at bleach, borax, vinegar, ammonia, and hydrogen peroxide. I am a huge fan of white vinegar as a way to clean your house. Obviously, it doesn't smell very good, but it's one of the greatest natural things to be cleaning it to get rid of any mold, fungus, or just in general. Like for instance, if your dishwasher or your washing machine starts to smell bad, if you run some vinegar through the wash, it can definitely help kind of clean out any mold or fungus that's growing in there as well. So really looking at keeping some white vinegar on hand. That's one of my favorites. All right, fertilizers. The main components of most fertilizers are nitrogen and phosphorus. Too much of these in the environment can have diverse and far reaching impacts on public health. So, plant fertilizers can poison people and pets if they are inhaled or accidentally ingested. Touching the fertilizer may cause skin irritation and ingestion, and ingesting may be poisonous. Nitrates are the ingredients that cause the poisoning. So, looking out for, if you're around fertilizers, let's say you do, yard work and you're using fertilizers, definitely wearing gloves and again, a mask. Nitrates are a form of nitrogen that plants can easily absorb. Nitrogen is essential for plant growth, but it can be very dangerous when present at high levels in humans. Kind of interesting, right? If it's something really good for plants, it's surprising that it would be, dangerous for humans, but there are compounds like that. Within our bodies, nitrates lower the ability of the red blood cells to carry and deliver oxygen. So we want to be careful with the nitrates that we are getting exposed to because it can cause some problems in our red blood cell count, which can cause problems in delivering oxygen to the body, in our immune system. So choosing an organic brand of fertilizer and or organic food supply is the best way to reduce exposure to the compounds in conventional fertilizers that are linked to poor health outcomes. So if you're using fertilizers in your home or you're around them, try looking at utilizing organic ones. I know they're more expensive. I get it. Sometimes it's not the greatest to spend more money on it just because it's organic, but you're really doing yourself a favor in not exposing yourself to those nitrates and other chemicals that are found in plant fertilizers. All right, then looking at heavy metals. So metals like arsenic, mercury, lead, aluminum, cadmium, can't say this one, cadmium, there we go, which are prevalent in many areas of our environment, can accumulate in soft tissues of the body. So again, we think that we're not, because we're not ingesting it, right? For the most part, we think we're not necessarily keeping all of these things in our system, but they do. They stay in the soft tissues of the body. So several acute and chronic toxic effects have been linked to the use of heavy metals. These include gastrointestinal and kidney dysfunction, nervous system disorders, skin lesions, vascular damage, immune system dysfunction, birth defects, and cancer. So really looking at, this picture gives a great, examples of all of the ways that we could be getting in, lead, or there's a lot lead in a lot of things. And looking at making sure that we're getting organic is always going to have, probably less or not any, heavy metals in things. And so looking at where we could possibly get in these in is looking at, dog treats or grass juice powders, right? All of these things that we believe are really healthy. If we're not getting a really healthy source, there could be a trace of heavy metals in these different things. Yeah, great question. So, how do organic fertilizers reduce the risk of harm, lower levels of nitrates, or maybe just aren't formulated in a way that humans can absorb? Yeah, I believe with the organic fertilizers, um, I mean, I'm not a genius when it comes to like yard work fertilizer, but I'm imagining that they're using a lower level of nitrates, or it's more so from a natural source, is what I'm imagining, right? When we're looking at organic um versions of things, they're utilizing the most natural version of that, right? And so I'm imagining, I'd have to look into that more, but I'm imagining it is either formulated in a way that you said that humans are absorbing it less, or that there are just a lower level of nitrates, and they're maybe adding something else in there. It's a great question. I apologize that I don't know the exact answer, but I bet, if we Googled it, we could definitely find an answer. Yeah, great question. Using aluminum foil to cover pans, is this harmful? Um, it's probably the best, option, right? Rather than like plastic that you're going to cover things in. Aluminum foil, they have found that it's not necessarily, we're not absorbing anything from the aluminum foil, right? And so when we use it to like cover our pans and things like that, there's a lot less, let's say, exposure to any metals, because it doesn't necessarily cross over and absorb into the food and everything that we're taking in. So yeah, great question. Obviously, using some sort of pan that has a lid, right, is always going to be, they always say glass pans are going to. Oh yeah, yeah. When you're cooking fish, yeah, that's no problem, right? Like if you're using it to like get the drip from your fish and all that. Yeah, that's no problem. All right. I see someone has their hand raised. You want to pop your microphone on, Kristen? Oh, I think I have to. There we go. Now I allow the talk. All right. Yeah. Anytime if you oh, maybe it was an accidental hand raise. No worries. Yeah, that's fine. Cooking with the aluminum foil, that's no problem. So there are metals typically found in dishes, tinfoil, batteries, paint, household products, light bulbs, electronics, fish. So ways that we can minimize our exposure is install water filters and use cold water for drinking. And then when you're making tea or coffee and cooking, we want to make sure that we, are heating that. Obviously, it's going to be heated. And so looking at utilizing those water filters will really help filter out any of those metals that you're experiencing in the kitchen, or really just any toxins in general. There are great water filters out there. And there are ones that tend to be, let's say, more natural, right? I think there's some that use charcoal and things of that nature. And so looking at the most natural water filters that you can. Limit fish high in mercury, such as king mackerel, tilefish, swordfish, shark, orange roughy, tuna, and marlin. And just remembering, yes, you can get mercury from fish, but if, as long as you're not eating like, 10 pounds of it at once, a small amount isn't going to harm you. And, if you're going to sushi, let's say, just being careful at how much raw fish you're taking in at once in that, sitting. We don't want to overdo the amount of raw fish as well, because we can find mercury in that too. If your home was built before 1978, check for lead paint. They used to put lead in the paint back then. Avoid buying products made with PFC, such as Teflon, cookware, and Scotchgard. We'll get to PFC in a minute. Avoid using treated wood. So, this is on decks or children's play structures. When you're using the treated wood, they can utilize some metals in there. Oh, yeah. No problem, Kristen. I assumed that was an accidental hand raise. No worries. All right, looking at bug spray. So obviously, we don't want the bugs on us, but let's talk about different things that are in most bug sprays. So most bug repellents are made with one of the two ingredients, DEET or prethurins. which more cases of things like West Nile and tick-borne illnesses it is important to repel bugs, right? Like we obviously need to repel certain bugs, but we want to use these products a few times per year. It does not seem to aggravate health, right? So if you're going on, a trip where there's, tends to be ticks and things of that nature, utilizing them here and there, not a big deal. However, if you use them daily, the CDC states regular application of DEET should be minimized to reduce skin irritation. High levels of prethrines or pyrethroids can cause dizziness, headache, nausea, muscle twitching, reduced energy, changes in awareness, convulsions, and loss of consciousness. So the recommendations is use only when needed and only once per day. So if you're kind of utilizing the bug spray, once per day is enough. Shower before bed to reduce overnight exposure and irritation. Spray outside only, right? So if you are spraying yourself down before you're getting ready to go, just go outside and do it. Use citronella candles. So this can be beneficial into helping repel bugs without it being on you, and without utilizing the spray. Those candles are beneficial. Try to reduce exposure to your lungs and face. So again, if you can, cover your face or wear a mask while you're putting it on. Cover body to reduce need for additional protection. So DEET is sometimes confused with DDT, which is now banned, and that it promoted birth defects and cancer. So that was back in the 70s, and they replaced it with DEET, thankfully. And so making sure that we are just being careful with how much we expose ourselves. All right, so then we have PBDEs. I know a lot of letters and random names for you to remember today, but you can just remember them as flame retardants. So these are typically found in our furnishings, covers, curtains, carpets, building and construction materials. They do not chemically bind to the products to which they are added, so such as furniture and electronics, so they easily release from these products and get into the air and dust. Although flame retardants can offer benefits when they are added to some products, a growing body of evidence shows that many of these chemicals are associated with adverse health effects in animals and humans, including endocrine and thyroid disruption, impacts to your immune system, reproductive toxicity, cancer, and adverse effects on fetal and child development and neurological function. So, looking at weight or reduction tips, try looking for products that do not have foam and instead have cotton or other fillers. So, foam has a lot of flame retardants on it. So, looking at cotton or other fillers, keep dust levels down, wash your hands often, vacuum instead of sweeping so that you're kind of sucking some of those out of the air. Look for organic cotton clothing and sheet or towel sets. So when you're looking at organic cotton, it's not going to have those. And then always opening the windows, getting some airflow. Um, and if you're buying something new, right, like a furniture or a cover or carpet or something of that nature, doing, a really good vacuum down of it can help take out some of those flame retardants. Obviously, it's for safety, right? That these don't light on fire. But once they're in our home, they don't want to light on fire when they're being produced and shipped. But when they're finally in our homes, obviously, we don't want flames in our homes either. But at that point, we don't need quite as much of it. So definitely, cleaning it or vacuuming it down can be very helpful. All right. So we went over all of the toxins. Let's look at some of the best toxin free brands. Again, I know you're going to be spending a little bit more on these, but it's really, really helpful in keeping your home toxin free. So for lawn care, looking at purely organic, eco scraps, organicide, Dr. Earth, and natural armor. For bug sprays, looking at Murphy's, Repel, Meow Meow. Didn't realize that was a brand, but that's pretty cool. Badger and Harper's Naturals. And then for paints, so looking at paints, just look at getting VOC free. And you can look at companies like Benjamin Moore, Sherwin Williams, Claire, Green Planet, and Homestead. For furniture and flooring, you could look at Medley, Savvy Rest, Avocado, Natural Home, and Green Cradle. And then for kitchenware, just always looking for glass containers is always going to be your best option. Cast iron or uncoated stainless steel, reusable water bottles that are BPA and BPH free, looking at bamboo utensils, and then silicone storage bags are all going to have less toxins in them, less chemicals that you can absorb. And other ways to reduce our exposure to these chemicals, they can be a little, overwhelming. This can be a lot, right? If you're not a person that already has, a fully organic home with all of these different things, it can feel like a lot to start with. So start small. Look at items you are putting in the yard and switch those to non toxic brands. Replace plastic containers with glass containers. Get reusable water bottles. Switch plastic wrap to beeswax wrap. Reduce the amount of tinfoil used. So again, if you're cooking your fish or your chicken and things that you need it for, that's just fine, but just start reducing the amount of tinfoil you're using. You can soak the pans instead of utilizing that for the dripping, and clean with baking soda. You could also, in the cooking of it, have the little rack that brings the fish or chicken up, and then put the foil down below it. If it's not right next to the food, right, you're going to get a little less absorption into the food there. And also using baking soda to clean, and then replace plastic coffee mugs with stainless steel ones. Yeah, awesome. And then here are some resources that you can take a look at. I'll leave those on the screen if you would like to take a look at those. And I have a question. Can we get this info emailed? I believe they'll be sending out a recording, and then you can, kind of go back and look at this screen and screenshot it if you want to. That one before it that had all the brands on there. Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to buy a bunch of new stuff. You can reuse glass sauce jars. Absolutely. This is a great point. Thank you so much. Save space in your fridge. Yeah. So after you use like a tomato sauce jar, then just clean it and you can reuse it to store things, right? Pickle jars, salsa jars, all of the glass things that you normally would buy something in. Yes, and thank you, Andrea. The recording will be on the Living Well public YouTube page. So if you want to go back and look at anything we talked about or screenshot any of those pages, you can absolutely do that. All right. If there are no more questions, I am glad that you were all here today. Thank you for joining live. If you have any last questions, feel free to put them in the chat box before you go. And if not, then thank you so much for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.